Welcome to the North Sessions. Settle in and let every story carry you towards sleep. My name is Andrea, and tonight I'll be your guide. In this evening's story, a marine biologist drops anchor off the coast of Tasmania as the last light fades, wraps herself in a blanket on the rear deck of her research vessel, and lets the southern ocean breathe quietly around her. Before we begin, take a moment to find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into whatever is supporting you right now. A thin, soft rain is already falling, gentle and patient, and the slow roll of ocean waves is moving beneath everything, steady and low. Let those sounds come forward and fill the space around you. When you're ready, we'll begin. Notice now the weight of your own body. Feel where you make contact with the surface beneath you, the give of a pillow, the press of a mattress against your shoulders, your hips, your heels. Let that contact hold you. You don't have to do anything. You're already exactly where you need to be. Allow your eyes to close, or let your gaze go soft and unfocused. Breathe in through your nose, easy and without effort. Breathe out and feel your chest lower. Let your jaw soften. Feel the small muscles around your eyes release. Let your shoulders drop just a little further than they were a moment ago. Your hands can rest open or curled lightly. It doesn't matter, just let them be still. Feel the rain somewhere at the edge of your awareness. Feel the long, low movement of water, rolling and receding, rolling and receding. Let your breathing begin to follow that rhythm, gentle and untroubled, as you settle toward the story waiting for you now. The thermos had been sitting between her feet for the better part of an hour, held in place by the raised lip of the deck rail, where it curved down to meet the gunwale. She reached for it without really looking, her fingers finding the ridged grip of the cap by feel alone, the way hands do when they have made the same small motion many times before. She unscrewed the cap and set it beside her on the bench, and then she picked up the mug she had brought from below, a wine. Low thing with a chipped rim and a faded image of a sea chart printed on its side. The chart showed a stretch of coastline she had sailed past twice in her life, though she had never quite been able to make out which one. The ink had softened over years of washing until the headlands blurred into one another like shapes seen through fogged glass. She tipped the thermos forward, and the tea came out in a thin, steady arc, catching what little light remained above the horizon. The steam rose from the mug in a loose, wandering column, bending gently sideways when the rain found a gap in the air and touched it. The way smoke from a candle tilts when someone passes quietly through a room. The smell reached her before the warmth did, It was a dark, slightly sweet smell, somewhere between earth and bark, with something underneath it that she had never quite been able to name, only recognize. She had been making this same blend since her first posting in the south, mixing it herself from 2 tins she kept in the galley. And the smell of it had become, over the years, almost inseparable from the sound of water against a hull. She wrapped both hands around the mug and held it in her lap, not yet drinking. The ceramic warmed her palms through her gloves, seeping in at the fingertips where the fabric had thinned. It was the particular comfort of a small thing done well, she thought, not warmth from any grand source, but the quiet warmth of something kept close and attended to. The rain tapped on, unhurried, working its way across the canvas awning above her in small, irregular clusters. Somewhere to her left, a boy rocked on the swell, its bell giving a single, low note that arrived and faded before she could be certain she had heard it. She brought the mug up slowly, and the steam passed across her face in a gentle cloud, settling against her cheeks for just a moment before it was carried away by the open air of the Southern Ocean, patient and wide, and breathing steadily around her in the dark. She set the mug down on the bench beside her, placing it carefully so the chipped rim faced away from the edge, the way she always did without thinking about it. The rain was coming a little more steadily now, not heavier exactly, but with more intention, each drop arriving in its own small circle on the deck planking and spreading outward before disappearing into the next. She reached up with both hands and gathered the blanket from where it had begun to slip from her shoulders. It was a dense, felted wool, the color of dried kelp, and it had been folded and unfolded so many times that it held the crease lines in its weave the way old paper holds the memory of being read. She drew it forward and tucked it around her sides, pulling the 2 front edges together across her chest and holding them there for a moment until the warmth began to build again underneath. The wool smelled faintly of salt and of something lanolin soft, a residue of the sea ere it had absorbed across many nights out here. It was not an unpleasant smell. It was the smell of time spent in a particular way, she thought, of evenings that had asked nothing of her but to sit still and be present. Somewhere beneath the hull, the water shifted. She felt it more than heard it, a gentle lift and return, the vessel adjusting by a few degrees and then settling back, easy and untroubled, like a sleeper finding a better position in the night. The anchor chain gave a low, brief murmur of tension and then went quiet again. She let her hands rest in her lap, still holding the edges of the blanket loosely. The rain moved across the awning above her in one of its soft, uneven passages, pausing between drops long enough that she could hear the ocean between them. Long, quiet exhales of water reaching the hull and withdrawing, reaching and withdrawing, She thought, without much weight to the thought, that she had been warm and cold and warm again so many times on nights like this that the two states had begun to feel less like opposites and more like a conversation. The cold came in and the warmth answered, and neither one made any particular demands. The mug sat beside her on the bench, still sending up a faint thread of steam. The buoy to her left moved again on the swell, but this time its bell did not sound, only the small, steady click of its hardware, testing the chain and finding it good. She tilted her head back slightly, just enough to look up at the underside of the awning, where the rain landed in quick, separate taps, each one joining the general murmur above her and becoming part of it, the way individual voices in a distant room eventually soften into one continuous sound. The mug was a wide, squat thing, thrown on a wheel by someone who had not worried too much about symmetry. Its sides curved slightly outward toward the middle, giving it a comfortable, settled shape in the hand. She had found it years ago in a second-hand shop on the mainland, and it had traveled with her on the vessel ever since, packed each time into the same soft cloth, emerging each time unchanged. She lifted both hands from her lap and wrapped them around it, fitting her palms against the ceramic where the warmth was most concentrated. The heat moved into her fingers steadily, reaching the knuckles and then deeper into the small joints that had grown stiff in the cool air. She did not grip tightly. She simply held it, the way you might hold something you are glad to have found. The tea inside was some kind of roasted grain blend she had bought at a small provision store near the harbor, chosen more or less at random from a shelf of tins with hand-lettered labels. It had a low, toasty smell, slightly smoky, with something underneath that was almost sweet. Not floral exactly, but warmer than that, like the smell of dry wood near a fire before it has fully caught. The steam moved upward in a faint, thin ribbon and then dispersed before reaching the awning. As she watched it for a moment, the rain above her continued in its even way, neither quickening nor fading, simply present. Her fingers had stopped aching. She noticed this in passing, the way you notice that a sound you had grown accustomed to has finally ceased. The warmth from the mug had spread through both hands and into her wrists, and she felt the rest of her body acknowledge this in a small way, a general easing, a settling of the shoulders. She thought about the day behind her, though not with any urgency. The samples she had collected in the afternoon sat, sealed in their containers below deck. The notes she had written were written. The work had gone the way most days at sea went, forward and quiet, full of small, careful observations and long stretches of waiting. She found she had no strong feeling about any of it at the moment, only a mild and easy satisfaction, the kind that belongs to tiredness more than to any particular achievement. The vessel shifted again beneath her, a gentle, brief movement that was really no more than a suggestion. The mug moved with her hands, which moved with the vessel, and the tea remained where it was, level and still, as if it had decided not to participate. She lowered her chin slightly. The warmth from the ceramic continued to spread. She turned the mug in her hands once before setting it down, a small, automatic gesture, the way a person might straighten a picture frame that was already level. The ceramic had cooled considerably. Only the very base of it still held any warmth, faint now, a remnant rather than a presence. She found a flat place on the deck beside her, just to the right of where she sat. The teak planking there was slightly damp from the rain, carrying the cool, clean smell of wet wood that had dried and been wetted again many times over many seasons. She placed the mug down without a sound, and it settled against the deck with a small, solid contact, unremarkable in the way that only familiar things can be. The handle faced outward. She had not chosen this deliberately, and yet it seemed like the natural way for it to rest. Her hands came back to her lap, empty now, and she noticed the difference at once. They felt lighter without the mug, and also slightly cooler, the warmth having already begun to leave her palms the moment she let go. She turned them over once, and then let them settle, open and easy, against the blanket. The rain continued above her in its steady, untroubled way. She could hear it on the awning and on the water around the vessel, and at a slightly different register on the surface of the sea further out, a softer and more diffuse sound, as though the ocean were absorbing it quietly rather than reflecting it back. The two sounds together, the close and the far, gave the rain a kind of depth she had not noticed earlier. She looked at the mug sitting there beside her. It was a plain thing in the dark, just a shape against the deck, but there was something companionable about it, like a small, reliable object that had done what it came to do and was now simply resting. She thought, without particular intention, about the provisions store near the harbour where she had bought the tea. It had been a narrow place, pressed between a chandlery and a bakery whose warmth had been coming out under the door. The man behind the counter had recommended nothing and said very little, which she had found restful. He had simply wrapped the tin in a small square of paper and passed it across without ceremony. She could not remember now whether she had said thank you, though she thought she probably had. The vessel moved beneath her, gentle and easy, a long, low rocking that seemed less like motion than like breathing. Her hands rested where they were. The mug sat beside her in the quiet. The rain went on. The rain was still there. She could hear it without listening. She became aware in a gradual way that one shoulder had grown cool. Not cold, just cool. The blanket had shifted at some point, working its way toward the left, and the right side had come loose by an inch or two. A small gap had opened at her collar. The night air moved through it, easy and mild, but present. She reached up without much thought and took hold of the blanket's edge. The wool was dense and slightly rough against her fingertips. It had dried out over the course of the evening, and it held a faint, mineral warmth now, the kind that comes from a thing that has been worn rather than heated. She drew it up and across, working it around her right shoulder first, then tucking the edge in against the left side of her neck where it had been before. The wool settled into place without resistance. She sat for a moment with both hands up near her collar, just holding it there. Then, in a quiet and unhurried way, she let her hands drop back to her lap. The warmth gathered again quickly. It was a soft, enclosed feeling, like being gently held by something that required nothing in return. The gap at her collar was gone. The night air was still there, but outside of her now, and that made it different. She noticed, with the blanket resettled, how complete the quiet felt. The rain on the awning, the low movement of the vessel. These sounds had not changed, but they seemed steadier somehow, more even than before. Her eyes had been open, though she could not have said what she had been looking at. The darkness over the water was a long, flat thing, with no edge she could find. The horizon had disappeared into it some time ago. She thought of her colleague Dara, who had once told her, during a night watch on an earlier survey, that the Southern Ocean at night felt like the ocean practicing being an ocean. She had not known exactly what Dara had meant at the time, but she thought she understood it a little more now. There was something here that was not quite performance and not quite rest. Something steady and self-contained, going on for its own reasons. Her right shoulder was warm again. The mug sat beside her, the shape of it familiar in the dark. The rain went on. The mug had gone cool at some point. She noticed it when she shifted her hand and felt the ceramic give back nothing. She reached to the side, moving carefully so as not to disturb the blanket. The thermos was there on the deck where she had left it. Her fingers found it without looking. The metal was cool and faintly damp from the rain, but solid, heavier than it appeared. She worked the cap off with one hand. It turned with a soft, satisfying resistance and then released. A small thread of steam rose from the opening. She could see it barely, a pale movement against the dark, and then it was gone. She lifted the mug in her left hand and tipped the thermos with her right. The tea came out in a steady, quiet pour. She could hear it filling, a low, close sound, almost private in the way it sat just beneath the rain. The level rose. She tipped the thermos back when it felt right and set it down again with care. The warmth came through the ceramic almost at once, moving into her palm and spreading across her fingers, finding the spaces between them. It was like pressing her hands against a river stone that had been sitting in afternoon light, warm all the way through. She did not drink yet. She just held the mug. The steam rose again. She could not see it now, but she knew it was there. The smell came to her instead, a mild and earthy smell, familiar in the way that things become familiar over many nights in similar places. She thought, without much intention, of the number of times she had done this. Out on the water late, with a thermos going cool and a mug going cooler. There had been other vessels, other coastlines, other kinds of dark. She had filled a mug in the lee of a research platform off the Crozet Islands once, both hands shaking from the cold. She had done it in flat, humid calm on a survey off Queensland. The gesture was always the same. The hands knew what to do. Here, the rain kept its easy rhythm on the awning. The vessel moved. The mug was warm. She brought it up and took a sip. The tea was still good. It had sat long enough in the thermos that the flavor had deepened a little, gone rounder and quieter at the edges. She held it on her tongue for a moment before it went down. She lowered the mug to her knee and kept both hands around it. The warmth stayed. Outside, the southern ocean went on doing what it had always done. She set the mug down on the deck beside her, just within reach. The rain had eased a little, not stopped, just softened into something finer, a mist more than a rain now, settling rather than falling. She felt it on the back of her hand where it rested outside the blanket, a faint, cool weight like breath. She reached up and gathered the blanket at her collar. The wool was thick and slightly rough at her fingertips. She had had this blanket a long time. It had been a dark green once, she thought, or something near it. The color had gone quieter over the years, washed into something harder to name. It smelled of the vessel now, of salt and diesel, and the particular dry warmth of the cabin below. Even out here in the mist, the smell stayed close. She pulled it tighter, drawing both sides across the front of her and overlapping them. The wool pressed against her jaw. The warmth inside shifted and resettled, finding its new shape around her, the way warm air turns inward when a door is closed against it, gathering itself. Her shoulder, which had been just at the edge of the cold, came back under the fold. She felt the difference right away. She let out a breath. Below her, the hull made a low, soft sound against the water, not a knock, more like a suggestion of movement, the vessel acknowledging the swell and then letting it pass. The anchor chain held. Everything held. She thought about the data she had taken that afternoon. The hydrophone readings, the water temperature at depth, the current markers she had noted in the log. They were all below in the cabin now, on the table in order. She did not need to think about them. She had thought about them, and now they were put away. The rain came back slightly, settling again into its old pattern on the awning above her. A sound like something breathing, even and without effort. She pressed the blanket fold down at her neck once more, just at the collar. The wool caught slightly on the fleece beneath and held there. That was enough. The mug was still warm at her side. The ocean moved. The chain held. The rain came down. She did not move again. Her hand found the mug without her looking. She had not meant to reach for it. Her fingers simply moved, settling around the ceramic the way they had a dozen times that evening, expecting warmth. There was none. The ceramic was cool against her palms, all the way through, not cold in any sharp way. Just the same temperature as the air, as the deck, as everything around her. It had been sitting long enough that the difference was gone. She held it anyway. The weight of it was still familiar. The slight ridge near the base where the glaze had thickened. The small, smooth patch near the handle where she always rested her thumb. These things had not changed. She turned it a little in her hands, the way she had turned it when it was full and steaming. The motion was the same, only the warmth was missing. Inside the mug, there was maybe a little left, not enough to matter. She could see the faint dark ring where the liquid had settled and gone still, like the tide line on a quiet shore. She did not drink it. She set it back down beside her, gently, in the same place it had rested all evening. It made a quiet sound against the deck, a small, final kind of sound. The rain came down as it had been coming down, fine and steady against the awning. The ocean moved beneath the hull in its long, easy way. The anchor chain held in the dark. She pulled the blanket a little higher, the wool coming up to press against her jaw. The warmth inside was still there, still gathered close. The mug sat at her side, cool and quiet. The rain kept on. The hull made its low sound against the water. The swell came in and passed and came again. Everything was where it had been. Everything was as it was. She let her eyes go soft against the dark. The mug had gone cold. The blanket was warm. The ocean breathed. She was still. And now, if you are still here, let the weight of the blanket come to you. Let the warmth at your collar settle. The rain is coming down somewhere, fine and even, and the water is moving the way it always moves, without hurry, without effort. You do not need to hold anything. The mug on the deck, the chain in the dark, the rain on the awning above. These things are taken care of. You can let them be. Settle in and let every story carry you towards sleep. Written by Zuhude Pablo, narrated by Lewis for the North Sessions. The blanket had shifted. She was not sure when. Her feet had moved at some point, settling into a new position against the deck, and the wool had gone with them, pulling away from where she had tucked it. She could feel the cool air now, just at the edge of her right foot. a thin line of it where the blanket had folded back. She reached down without sitting up. Her hand moved along the outside of the blanket, finding the hem by feel. The wool was dense there, a little thicker at the edge, the way it always was. Her fingers found the fold and drew it back, gently, pulling it across and down until it covered her feet again. She pressed it lightly at the sides, just a little pressure, enough to settle it into place. The wool was warm all the way through from where it had been resting against her. It held that warmth the way the water held the last of the evening light, slowly, long after the source of it was gone. Her feet disappeared again beneath the wool. The cool line of air was gone. She let her hand rest on top of the blanket for a moment. The texture of it was even and steady beneath her palm, the same fine weave everywhere. She had bought this blanket in Hobart years ago, a small shop near the waterfront. She could not remember now whether it had been raining that day. Probably it had. It usually was. She let the thought go. It did not need to go anywhere. The rain was still coming down, fine and even against the awning, the same as it had been. The hull moved a little, and the change shifted in the water below, a low sound, easy and familiar. The blanket lay still over her feet. The ocean breathed. The rain came down. Everything was where it had been. She did not move again. The rain came down across the water, fine and even, reaching all the way to the dark line of the coast. The vessel moved just enough to say it was floating. The chain gave its low sound and was quiet. Above the awning, the clouds were the same deep grey they had been at dusk, unhurried, moving somewhere far to the south. The southern ocean breathed in. The southern ocean breathed out. The rain found the deck, and the mug, and the wool, and the water all around, without preference, without pause. Everything it touched the same. Out past the bow, the darkness held its shape. The swell came in. The swell passed. Everything was as it was.